and welcome to our Tuesday edition of ONIT College Basketball. We got some big-time upsets to talk about over the weekend and a bunch of great games coming up this week that we'll be covering. Before we dive on in, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and you enjoy the content as we're covering men's and women's college basketball here through March Madness. And if you want to find out how you can get involved in an upcoming ONIT video, make sure you stick around to the end of today's show and we'll show you how you can show off some of your ONIT cards. With that all said, let's begin by taking a look at what's in our basketball box. What's in the box? Our Tuesday ONIT basketball box features our locally sourced but nationally relevant headlines for all of our men's and women's ONIT teams. We'll take a look at who made the grade over the weekend with the best performances, tell you about the games that are coming up this week, and lastly, we'll give you our 10 players to watch over the course of this final week in January. Let's begin by looking at our best men's and women's player of the weekend in Making the Grade. Time for Making the Grade, our best men's and women's player of the weekend right here. And we'll get started on the men's side with our Gem Mint 10. This week's winner is Braden Smith from the Purdue Boilermakers. Even in an 88-82 loss, he was the best offensive performer this week for our ONIT teams. He ended with 27 points and 12 assists, going 11 of 16 from the floor in the Boilers Make Your Loss. He was the entire offense for this team. Nobody else scored more than 12 points. A ton of people struggled to make shots. Smith was the only guy that can consistently make shots. And then when he was passing the ball, the only time that anybody made a shot on his team was when he set them up with the 12 assists. So even though he was outscored in this game by Keaton Wagler, who had 46 points for Illinois in a crazy performance, Braden Smith, easily our ONIT player of the week on the men's side, and he earns a Gem Mint 10, 27 points, 11 of 16 shooting, 12 assists, and 3 rebounds in the loss to Illinois. On the women's side, because we love NIL for all here at ONIT, we're picking Olivia Olson as our Gem Mint 10 performer. She had another great game for the number 9 ranked Wolverines. 17-3 now on the year after holding off USC's second half comeback to win 73-67. She had 24 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 steals, as she has been a key contributor all season for the Wolverines, and her season averages are now 18.1 points per game with 5.7 rebounds and 2.3 assists per contest. She's been a key catalyst for Michigan and a big reason why they're inside the top 10 in the latest AP poll. So she earns herself a Gem Mint 10 grade for the win over the Trojans. With our 2 Gem Mint 10 performers recognized, let's take a look at some of these crucial matchups we have coming up this week, beginning with our ONIT game of the week. It's time to talk about our ONIT games of the week, and we will start on the men's side in a top 5 matchup in the Big Ten between the conference leading Nebraska Cornhuskers, 20-0, 9-0 in the Big Ten, and number 5 in the nation, the highest ranking they've ever had in the basketball AP poll, as they go to Ann Arbor and take on the number 3 Michigan Wolverines, 18-1, 8-1 in the Big Ten, just a game back of the undefeated Cornhuskers. This should be, by all accounts, maybe the best game of the season that we have had so far. Michigan's had a great schedule. They've played a lot of tough teams. They had a win over Gonzaga as well. That's a top 10 win at the moment. But this game against the upstart Cornhuskers, a team that nobody thought was going to be where they are, is going to be one of the games of the regular season in the Big Ten. Nebraska's coming off their victory over Minnesota. Price Sandfort once again dominant in that game with 22 points. Nebraska on their 20-0 run, they have beaten some really good teams in this stretch. 16 of their 20 wins have come against teams with a winning record. That's pretty impressive stuff. It's not just Nebraska beating up on a bunch of cupcakes. They're going out and beating teams that are winning games. So this is going to be very interesting. Over the last 10, Michigan is 9-1, averaging almost 90 points a game. and shooting over 50% from the field. This Wolverines offense is unbelievable. And Nebraska is going to have to slow it down if they're going to win this game. Meanwhile, Nebraska in that same stretch, of course, they're 10-0 since they're unbeaten. They're only averaging 78 points a game and shooting 47% from the field. But defensively, they're holding their opponents to under 63 points per game over their last 10 games. That's an amazing defensive ability there from Nebraska compared to Michigan, whose opponents are scoring 71 points a game, but Michigan is scoring almost 20 points a game more than them with the nearly 90 points a game that Michigan is scoring. So it is a great defense in Nebraska and a great offense in Michigan. Who will prevail? That is the question. It is 7 p.m. tonight on Peacock from Ann Arbor. If you're a college basketball fan, this is a game that you will not want to miss between our two ONIT teams in a top 5 matchup. And on the women's side, we have an ONIT Game of the Week matchup between two of our ONIT teams. As number 3, South Carolina travels to Alabama to take on the Auburn Tigers. This is an SEC matchup on the SEC Network on January 29th, Thursday at 9 p.m. South Carolina over their last 5 is 4-1. The Gamecocks come into this game at 20-2. They suffered their first SEC loss in that overtime upset against Oklahoma, but got right back on track with a win over Vanderbilt, 103-74. They absolutely blew the doors off the Commodores, who are ranked number 5 in the country when South Carolina managed to take them down. Meanwhile, for Auburn, things have been a little bit different. They're 13-8, just 2-5 in SEC play, and in their last 5 games, they are just 2-3, losing a close game to Oklahoma, a team that upset South Carolina, also losing by a big margin against Vanderbilt. So both these teams have seen some common opponents recently. The wins for Auburn came over Alabama and Florida, but 2 of those games have been on the road. 2 of their losses, that is, at Vanderbilt and at Texas. In both of those games, that is where Auburn got absolutely handled by those teams. They lost by nearly 30 points to Vanderbilt, and they lost by 61 at Texas in Austin. So, good news for Auburn is that they are at home, where they played Oklahoma very tight. Oklahoma obviously had the blueprint to beat this South Carolina team, and Auburn was able to hang with them. Will they be able to do that again at home? It's very unlikely, I would say, just because South Carolina, as you could tell, was very frustrated by their loss to Oklahoma. They came out and blitzed Vanderbilt, and Joyce Edwards is just such a hard player to handle. She's shooting 60% this year, averaging 20 points per game. She is just a hard player to try to stop on the defensive end if you are the opposing team. And for South Carolina, she can really kind of backpack the team when needed. So we'll see if that happens. Meanwhile, for Auburn, their leading scorer, only 11.1 per game. That is Harrison Kubayali. She's averaging just 11.1 points per game. She's a freshman from Paris, France, shooting 51% this year. So the sky's the limit, clearly, for her, as she's having a great freshman season. But the experience, I know that Edwards is only a sophomore, but that 1 year makes a big difference. You've seen the leap that Joyce Edwards has taken this season from last year. She's up nearly 8 points per game. Her rebounds up, assists up, steals up, blocks up. All of her numbers are up. As you can tell, she made that freshman to sophomore leap. So I think Joyce Edwards is just going to be too hard to handle here for Auburn. But we'll see if the Tigers can still pull the upset regardless. Again, this is Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time, coming to us from Auburn, Alabama, our ONIT Women's Game of the Week. Here's a look at the rest of the men's lineup this weekend for our ONIT schools. Number 2, UConn at 19-1 on the season. They just took down a close win against Villanova at home, and now they get Providence tonight. Providence is a team that has been struggling this year, so number 2 Huskies shouldn't have a problem handling Providence, especially at home there in Connecticut, but we'll see what happens this evening. And then number 6 Gonzaga, 21-1 on the year. I talked about it last show. San Francisco always plays Gonzaga tough for some reason. The Bulldogs able to get out of there with a 68-66 win, and now they get St. Mary's, another team that has traditionally really played Gonzaga hard. It's not going to be an easy game for Gonzaga. They managed to escape at home with the win over San Francisco by 2 points. Can they hold on and take down St. Mary's and potentially move into the top 5 in the AP poll next week as they sit just on the border at number 6. We'll see. Number 12, Purdue. After their loss to Illinois, they're back in action at Indiana tonight. They dropped 8 spots after the loss to Illinois. The 4-seeded Purdue Boilermakers losing to the number 11-seeded Illinois Fighting Illini. Somehow they dropped 8 spots for that. Don't really know how that happens, but Purdue's 17-3 now. That was a really good game. Braden Smith played well. We'll talk more about him later, but Purdue trying to get back on track tonight on the road against Indiana. Then Ohio State won last night against Penn State 84-78 at home in Columbus. They get Wisconsin on Saturday, so a nice bit of rest there for the Buckeyes, who could certainly use it as they're now 14-6 on the season. Looking at a couple of our timeless only teams, again, their men's basketball product is only available in a timeless subscription. We have number 15 Arkansas, 15-5 on the year. They jumped 5 spots thanks to their week that they had last week, including a win over LSU, 85-81 last time out. They'll be on the road at Oklahoma tonight. And then Auburn, another timeless only school, 13-7. Huge upset win over Florida. Probably the win of the week for our ONIT teams. They get it done on the road in Gainesville, 76-67. A Florida team that everybody thought was potentially the best team in the SEC. Well, Auburn managed to get it done, and they will get Texas tomorrow night in an ONIT versus ONIT matchup. So looking forward to that game. Auburn at 13-7 still has a potential shot to get into the NCAA tournament, but they're going to have to keep winning SEC conference games if they're going to make it. Another one of our timeless only teams in Penn State. They mentioned they lost to Ohio State last night, 84-78. They're on the road at Northwestern on Thursday night, so they get a couple of days break, but they are staying on the road. Nittany Lions are now at 9-11 on the year as they try to claw their way back to 500, and it starts with getting a win Thursday night over Northwestern. And then Texas, we mentioned, they're a timeless only team as well. 12-8 on the year after picking up a massive upset win over Georgia. Beat number 21 Georgia 87-67, and in the second half alone, it was Texas 57, Georgia 30. So they outscored Georgia by 27 points in the second half, and that win helped knock Georgia out of the polls. They'll be on the road at Auburn. We got an ONIT versus ONIT matchup there. That game could be big for both teams. Texas with a ranked win. Texas has some good wins on the season. Auburn has some good wins on the season. One of them has to lose, though, unfortunately. So whoever loses probably derails their tournament hopes, at least in the at-large bid opportunity spot. But who knows? One of these teams could get hot and win the SEC tournament. So that's a game to keep your eyes on. That game is on Wednesday night. Texas at Auburn on January 28th, Wednesday. Then Texas A&M, once again, a timeless only school for us here in winter sports. They're 16-4, big win over South Carolina, 92-69. They're on the road at Georgia, so they won't have the opportunity to pick up a ranked win anymore after Texas knocked them out of the polls. But still, a win over Georgia would be good. It was a team that was ranked at some point, so Texas A&M would love to pick that up. They'd be 17-4 and potentially knocking on the door of an at-large to the NCAA tournament as well. Then we have UCLA, 13-6. They won against Northwestern, 71-64. They'll be on the road on the West Coast, at least, which I'm sure will keep Mick Cronin happy. They are at Oregon, a team that has been floundering this season for one reason or another. If UCLA wants to continue putting their tournament resume together to make sure they're not overlooked when Selection Sunday comes, this is a game they have to have. And lastly, West Virginia on the men's side, the last of our teams that is a timeless exclusive. They're 13-7. They had a tough task. We talked about it in Friday's video. Had to go on the road against number 1 Arizona. They did not win that game. It wasn't. Here's what our women's ONIT teams are doing this week on the basketball court. Taking a look at number 1 UConn, still undefeated after they demolished Seton Hall 92-52. They're taking on Xavier on Wednesday, January 28th, trying to get to 22-0 and remain undefeated. It's been a full team effort all year for UConn, led by Sarah Strong, but plenty of other contributors have gotten UConn to 21-0 as they look to go to 22-0 this week with more Big East play. Then, number 9, Michigan, off their win over USC, 73-67, our pick for the game of the week this weekend on the women's side, or last weekend on the women's side. They're now 17-3. They have Indiana on Thursday night. They did fall 2 spots in the rankings after their loss to Vanderbilt, but Michigan is still inside the top 10, and they're going to try to get back to that number 7 ranking and potentially climb even higher, and it starts on Thursday night at Indiana. Number 11, Ohio State, 18-3. They just lost on the road at number 10, Iowa. That Iowa team is very legit. It was a 91-70 loss for Ohio State. They still did move up in the rankings to number 11 because they beat TCU, but they got Wisconsin on Thursday night. They are back at home, are the Buckeyes. They will certainly relish that, I would think. So they'll take on Wisconsin and try to potentially crack inside the top 10, although that loss at Iowa might hurt them come next week's rankings. We'll see, though. For number 15, Tennessee, they're still 14-3 because their game against Ole Miss was postponed due to the inclement weather and that winter storm that came through. So Tennessee did not play. They're scheduled to play Mississippi State at home in Knoxville on Thursday night. We'll see if that game happens. For all of you, though, who were affected by that winter storm, hope you're doing well, hope you are safe, and hope all is good with you. For all of those who were affected throughout the central and then east coast of the United States. So we'll see if Tennessee gets in their game against Mississippi State, and we'll see when they replay that game at Ole Miss. That was supposed to be a number 15 versus number 18 matchup, as Tennessee has now moved up in the polls with that postponement. So that's something to keep your eye on. And then USC at 11-9, coming off that loss on the road at Michigan. They tried everything they could to get back into that game, but 73-67, they were unable to get it done as they tried a ferocious second half comeback. And it doesn't get any easier for them because they get an Iowa team that is ranked inside the top 10 this week. It is at home in Los Angeles, but this Iowa team, as we saw against Ohio State, they're really good. So USC has their backs against the wall yet again here in the coming days. Number 2, UCLA, 19-1 on the year. Easy win for them against Northwestern, 80-46. And on Wednesday night, they'll be on the road at Illinois. Another team that shouldn't pose too much of a challenge for the Bruins at 19-1. With South Carolina moving, UCLA has jumped them in the rankings. So UCLA now number 2 on the women's side. They're going to try to hold on to that spot as South Carolina tries to get back into the 2 spot. But everybody's really just chasing UConn at the moment on the women's side. Then we have our first timeless only team. That would be Texas. They're still 19-2. Had a rest this weekend. Last time out, they beat Texas A&M 80-35. Very easy win for Texas over their in-state rival. They'll be in Gainesville on Thursday night. They take on the Gators. They are at Florida on Thursday evening. And again, Texas, a timeless only team for both men's and women's basketball. So if you want to pick up any Texas women's basketball cards, you got to do it through a timeless subscription. That is the same for Arkansas, who is 11-10, lost to Georgia 76-66. They have another tough game coming up Thursday night. They'll be at number 6 LSU. So more difficulty there for Arkansas. They've played a very tough schedule to this point. I mean, the SEC is a loaded conference. We saw they got 10 teams in the AP top 25 this week. Arkansas, unfortunately, not one of those teams that got into the top 25, but they are going to play number 6 LSU. So going to be a big game for Arkansas. We'll see what happens there. And then Nebraska, 15-5. They fell out of the polls this week, even after their win over Illinois, 81-75. They'll take on Northwestern on Wednesday night. Another game that should be a little bit easier for Nebraska. They've had their ups and downs recently, but right now they're back up. So if they can string together some wins this week, they might find themselves back inside the rankings next week after they fell out from number 24. And then our final 2 timeless-only teams on the women's side, Penn State and Texas A&M. Penn State 7-13, just lost at Oregon 89-59 as they finished up their West Coast road trip. I'm sure they will be glad to be back in Pennsylvania as they get Minnesota on Wednesday night. And for Texas A&M, just 8-8 on the season. Not played nearly as many games as everybody else in women's college basketball. They just lost on the road at Missouri, 81-70. They're on the road at Oklahoma once again. That'll be Thursday night as the road trip continues for the Aggies, and they try to bounce back into the win column and get back above 500. That's how it looks for our women's teams this week. Let's see who the most impactful players could be over the course of the week as we look at our players to watch. These are this week's players to watch for us here on it. Our 5 men and our 5 women who I think are going to have the biggest impact in their games during the course of this week. We'll start off with Price Sanford for Nebraska. Huskers, number 5 in the nation, taking on number 3 Michigan this week. That is a huge game. It's our on-it game of the week, of course. Sanford's been the best player this year for the undefeated Cornhuskers. If they want to win this game, it's going to have to go through him. So he is my number 1 pick. Sarah Strong, we just saw her have another amazing game for UConn. Chances are she'll keep it rolling in UConn's next contest this week. And then Darius Acup Jr. for Arkansas, switching back to the men. He's the main contributor for Arkansas, leading the team in scoring. The biggest reason why the Razorbacks are up to number 15 in the polls after they jumped 5 spots this week. So he's a guy to keep your eye on. Same thing with Olivia Olson. Although Michigan dropped in the polls this week, her play against USC was the reason why they won that game. And she is going to be the catalyst if Michigan is going to keep winning games. Braden Smith, we saw what he did, earning a Gem Min 10 this week, even in the loss to Illinois. He's the guy that makes Purdue tick, so keep an eye on him as Purdue tries to get back inside the top 10 after falling 8 spots. Crazy stuff. Gabriela Jaquez for UCLA. She's already got the Bruins up to number 2 in the country, sitting right behind those undefeated Huskies after they jumped South Carolina this week. Jaquez is one of the best players on that team, really do-it-all guard. So she is going to be a key piece of whether UCLA can stay in that number 2 spot or whether they end up giving it back to South Carolina. And then Morez Johnson Jr. at Michigan. He's the guy that if Nebraska focuses on shutting down Yaxel Lendenberg, it's going to be up to Morez Johnson to make an impact in that game against the Huskers. And if Michigan is going to hand Nebraska their first loss, I think both Lendenborg and Johnson Jr. are going to have to play key roles in that. So that is why I've highlighted more as Johnson Jr. here. Joyce Edwards, when we talk about South Carolina, she is South Carolina embodied. So she is one of my players to keep an eye on this week. Another great season from her. And then Keyshawn Hall for Auburn. He was the guy that basically upset Florida single-handedly for the Tigers. 24 points for him. Fantastic game on the road in a hostile environment. If Auburn is going to keep this winning streak alive and get into the NCAA tournament, Keyshawn Hall is a name to watch. And lastly, Madison Booker at Texas. She's been phenomenal this season. Really fun to watch play, whether it's on the glass or with her scoring touch. So keep an eye on her as Texas tries to get past maybe South Carolina and UCLA and hop in line behind UConn. So couple of teams from the top 4 in women's basketball. We've got that top 5 matchup between Nebraska and Michigan this week. Tons of good stuff to watch out for. These are my 10 players that I think you should be watching. And if you pull any basketball cards here this week, we'd love to see them. Send them to us at the link down below. You can also find it in the description. We'll share them off here on the channel, and we'll get some polls of the week going, whether it's football, basketball, or whatever ONIT cards you may be ripping, even if it's from 2024 or 2023. We'd love to see some of your ONIT polls, so send them to us down in the link in the description, or go to onitathlete.com/highlights. That's all the time we have this week. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this show. Please do subscribe if you want to hear more ONIT college basketball talk as we covered men and women in their race to March Madness. And we will be back on Friday to take a look at how these games played out and what's coming up over the weekend. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.